What's up, guys? Welcome to Reddit Story Dose. Today we've got 5 stories for you, and trust me, I still can't believe these are real. Sit back, relax, and let's get into it. From R. Petty Revenge. My boss falsely accused me of not doing my job. The investigation revealed she was embezzling. Sometimes karma does not need your help. It just needs a trigger. And my resignation was that trigger. I need to give you some context first, because without it, this story is just about a bad boss. With it, you will understand why I still think about this almost every day. I was going through the worst period of my life. My husband and I had been trying to start a family for over 2 years. 3 pregnancies, 3 losses. The last one was the furthest along, 14 weeks, and I had just started to let myself believe it was really happening. I had a little list of names saved in my phone. I had looked at cribs online during my lunch break. And then, in a sterile room under fluorescent lights, a doctor told me there was no heartbeat, and the world just sort of collapsed inward. I was in the middle of medical testing to figure out why my body kept doing this. Blood draws every other week. Specialists who spoke in careful, clinical language that somehow made everything feel worse. I was exhausted. I was heartbroken. Some mornings I sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I could make myself walk through the front doors. But I showed up to work every single day because I needed the income and I needed the distraction. If I stayed home, I would just sit on the couch and stare at nothing, and I could not afford to do that, emotionally or financially. My boss, a woman named Sandra who had been with the company for 25 years, had never liked me. From the day I was hired, she treated me like an inconvenience. I was never sure why. Maybe she saw something in me that threatened her. Maybe she just needed someone to look down on. Whatever it was, she tolerated me as long as I stayed quiet and did my work. So that is what I did. I kept my head down, did my job, and tried not to draw attention. Then one afternoon, she appeared at my desk with a manila folder and dropped it next to my keyboard. "I need you to take this on," she said. "Client deliverable. Due Friday." I opened the folder, scanned the scope, and felt my stomach tighten. It was easily 20 hours of work, and I already had 2 active projects with deadlines that same week. I looked up at her and said, as politely and professionally as I could, "Sandra, I am at capacity right now with the Henderson and Avery reports. Is there any flexibility on the deadline, or could someone else take the lead on this one?" She stared at me for a long moment. Her expression did not change, but something shifted behind her eyes. She said, "Fine," and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. The next morning, I received a calendar invite for a 2 o'clock department meeting. No agenda listed. When I walked into the conference room, everyone was already seated, 12 people, all watching me find my chair. Sandra stood at the front of the room and, for the next hour, systematically dismantled me. She pulled up productivity metrics, mine alongside everyone else's, and framed them in a way that made it look like I was barely contributing. She questioned my work ethic. She questioned my commitment. She said, and I will never forget this, "Some people on this team show up every day and give everything they have. And some people just show up." She looked right at me when she said it. I could feel my face burning. My colleague David, who sat next to me, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. A few people looked down at the table. Nobody said a word. Nobody defended me. I do not blame them. Sandra had been there for 25 years and people were afraid of her. I sat there in silence because I knew that if I opened my mouth, I would say something I could not take back. I would tell her about the 3 babies I had lost. I would tell her about the blood tests and the grief and the mornings I could barely stand up. And she did not deserve to know any of that. She had not earned that part of me. So I sat there. I let her finish. I walked back to my desk, and I kept working until 5 o'clock. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a glass of wine I probably should not have been drinking. My husband sat across from me, watching me type. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. I nodded. I have never been more sure of anything. I drafted my resignation that night. Clean, professional, 2 weeks notice. No emotion, no accusations. 3 days later, I walked it into HR and handed it over. Sandra was not even in the building that day. I did not bother telling her in person. What happened next was not my doing, but it was certainly my favorite outcome. After I left, the company's data analyst, a sharp, methodical woman named Priya, was asked to redistribute my workload among the remaining team members. To do this properly, she needed to review exactly what I had been doing on a day-to-day basis. She started pulling my files, my logs, my completed deliverables. What she found shocked the department. I had not been doing the minimum. I had been doing my entire job plus significant portions of 3 other people's jobs. Over the previous year and a half, I had quietly picked up slack for the entire team. Reports that were supposed to be handled by others had my fingerprints all over them. Data entry that Sandra herself was supposed to review and approve. I had been doing it for her because she never got around to it, and the clients could not wait. Priya told a friend, who told David, who eventually told me. When I mapped out everything you were handling, I actually laughed out loud. One person was doing all of that, and they called you the weak link. But Priya did not stop there. She dug deeper, because the numbers were not adding up, and Priya was the kind of person who needed numbers to add up. That is when things got very interesting. She discovered that Sandra had been falsifying her work hours for years. She had been logging overtime she never worked, sometimes 8 to 10 extra hours per week. She had been approving her own expense reports with inflated figures. Meals that never happened, conferences she never attended, and several larger financial discrepancies pointed to something much worse than sloppy bookkeeping. They pointed to outright embezzlement. The 25-year veteran. The woman who stood in front of 12 people and told them I was not pulling my weight. She had been stealing from the company the entire time I worked there, and probably long before. Sandra was terminated within 1 week of the audit beginning. From what I heard, it was not quiet. Security walked her out. She carried a single box. Nobody said goodbye. The company initiated a full forensic audit of her entire tenure. I do not know the final number, but I heard it was significant. 2 weeks after she was fired, I received a phone call from the CEO. Not my old department head. The CEO. He personally apologized for how I had been treated. He said the company had failed me, that what happened in that conference room should never have been allowed to occur. He offered me my position back with a significant raise, a new reporting structure, and a written guarantee that the department would be restructured. I thanked him sincerely. And then I declined. Some bridges are not worth rebuilding. That building, that parking lot, that conference room, they would never feel like anything other than the place where I was humiliated during the worst chapter of my life. No raise changes that. No apology erases it. But I will admit, sitting on my couch that evening, reading the text from David that said Sandra had been escorted out of the building carrying a single cardboard box, I smiled for the first time in a long time. It did not fix anything. It did not bring back what I had lost. But it made the worst year of my life just a little bit better. And sometimes, a little bit better is enough. Okay, get ready for this. HOA fined me $50 per day for my garden. I turned it into a legal nightmare that changed state law. I have been growing vegetables in my front yard for 8 years. It started with 2 tomato plants and a small patch of basil the summer after we moved in. My daughter was 3 years old, and she used to sit in the dirt next to me while I planted seeds, her little fingers pressing them into the soil like she was tucking them into bed. By year 8, that front yard was a full garden: tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, herbs, squash, cucumbers in the summer, kale in the fall. It was beautiful. The neighbors used to stop and compliment it. Old Mrs. Chen from across the street would bring me empty bags and I would fill them with whatever was ripe. It fed my family. It fed other families too. Then the HOA got a new board president. Her name was Deborah. She moved into the neighborhood about a year before she ran for the board, and I remember thinking she seemed like the type who measured her grass with a ruler. She smiled a lot, but it never quite reached her eyes. Within 2 months of taking over, she started pushing through new rules, approved paint colors, restrictions on holiday decorations, regulations about where you could park your own car in your own driveway. I should have seen it coming. One evening in April, I was out watering my pepper plants when she walked by with her little white dog. She stopped and stared at my garden like she had just noticed a dead animal on the sidewalk. That's quite a lot of vegetation, she said. Thanks, I said. The sugar snap peas are doing really well this year. She didn't smile. Have you considered moving all of this to the backyard? It would look so much nicer with some sod and maybe a few hydrangeas. I laughed because I thought she was joking. I've got 8 years invested in this soil, I told her. The backyard doesn't get enough sun. She said, just, and walked away. 3 weeks later, the HOA pushed through a new rule. Front yards were to contain only ornamental landscaping, grass, flowers, and approved shrubs. Vegetable gardens were reclassified as agricultural activity, which was now prohibited under the community guidelines. I read the notice twice because I genuinely could not believe what I was seeing. Then the violation notice came. $50 a day until I removed my garden. Every single day. I remember standing at my mailbox holding that letter, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the kind of anger that starts in your stomach and rises up through your chest until your ears get hot. I had built something good. Something real. And this woman wanted me to rip it out of the ground and plant decorative grass so the neighborhood would look like a page from a catalog. I did not remove my garden. The fines piled up. $50 a day, every day. After 1 month, I owed $1,500 to the HOA for the crime of growing tomatoes on my own property. My wife started to worry. Maybe we should just move the garden, she said one night, sitting at the kitchen table with the stack of notices between us. It's not worth losing the house over. It's my yard, I said. I'm not ripping out 8 years of work because Deborah thinks zucchini is ugly. I am not a lawyer. I want to be clear about that. But I am a stubborn person with internet access and a library card, and that is a dangerous combination. I spent every free hour researching HOA authority, property rights, state legislation, court precedents. I read legal blogs. I read actual case law. I read HOA bylaws so dry they could have been used as kindling. And then I found it. My state had recently passed legislation, less than a year before, in fact, explicitly protecting homeowners' right to grow vegetables on their residential property, including front yards. The law had been passed specifically because of cases like mine. It was right there in black and white. The HOA rule directly contradicted state law. My heart was pounding when I printed it out. I highlighted the relevant sections, drafted a letter citing the statute, and mailed it to the HOA board. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. They ignored it. I sent a second letter. This time I included a full copy of the law with the key passages highlighted in yellow. I was polite but firm. I explained that their rule was unenforceable and that I expected the fines to be rescinded. Their response was to increase the fine to $100 per day. $100 per day for growing food. That was when I hired a lawyer. Her name was Maria, and when I explained the situation, she actually laughed. Not at me, at them. They increased the fines after you cited the statute? She said, shaking her head. That's bold. That's really bold. Maria sent a formal cease and desist letter. She explained clearly and concisely that the HOA rule was unenforceable under state law, that the fines had no legal basis, and that their continued enforcement constituted harassment. She gave them 30 days to respond. The HOA's response was to place a lien on my property. A lien on my house over tomatoes. I remember the moment I found out. I was standing in my kitchen, and Maria called me. Her voice was calm, but I could hear something underneath it. Not worry, more like the quiet satisfaction of a chess player watching their opponent make a catastrophic mistake. They just made this very easy for us, she said. That was their biggest mistake. Maria filed suit. Within a week, a local food rights organization caught wind of the case and offered pro bono legal support. Then the local news picked it up. A reporter came to my house and filmed a segment standing right next to my tomato plants. My daughter, now 11, stood next to me for the interview and said, "I don't understand why someone would be mad about a garden." That clip got shared thousands of times. A state legislator saw the coverage and contacted us. She used my case as a real-world example when proposing amendments to strengthen the existing garden protection law. She stood on the floor of the state legislature and talked about my tomatoes. The court ruled in my favor. It was not close. The HOA was ordered to remove the lien, refund all fines with interest, pay my legal fees in full, and amend their community rules to comply with state law. The judge's written opinion included a line I will never forget: a homeowner's right to cultivate food on their own property is not an aesthetic question. It is a fundamental one. Deborah resigned from the board 2 days after the ruling. I heard she moved to a different neighborhood a few months later. I have never spoken to her since. I don't need to. The strengthened state law now explicitly prohibits HOAs from banning vegetable gardens on any residential property. Front yard, backyard, side yard, doesn't matter. It passed unanimously. Not a single dissenting vote. That was last fall. This spring, I expanded the garden. Added 2 more raised beds and a row of blueberry bushes along the fence. Mrs. Chen brought her grandkids over last weekend to help me plant sunflowers. My daughter still sits in the dirt with me sometimes, though now she's tall enough to reach the top of the tomato cages. My tomatoes have never tasted better. You're gonna love this one. AITA for not paying for my stepdaughter's wedding after she said I'm not her real dad? I have been in my stepdaughter Lily's life since she was 4. She is now 26. I married her mother when Lily was 6. Her biological father left before she was born and has never been part of her life. Not a phone call, not a birthday card, not a single dollar of child support. Just gone, like he never existed. I did everything a father does. I went to every school play, sitting in those tiny auditorium seats with my knees pressed against the row in front of me, recording shaky videos on my phone. I went to every soccer game, standing on the sidelines in the rain, yelling myself hoarse when she scored. I went to every parent-teacher conference, nodding along while her teachers told me how bright she was, how kind, how she lit up the room. And every time, I felt this warmth in my chest, this pride that I could not put into words. That is my daughter, I would think. My kid. I taught her to drive in the parking lot of the old Kmart that had shut down on Route 9. She was so nervous her hands were shaking on the wheel, and I put my hand on her shoulder and said, "You have got this, kid. Just breathe." She stalled the car 4 times that first day, and we laughed about it the whole drive home. I helped with college applications, sitting at the kitchen table until midnight, reading her essays and telling her which ones made me feel something. I paid for her first car, a beat-up 2012 Honda Civic that she loved like it was a Ferrari. I walked her through her first heartbreak, when she was 17 and some boy named Tyler broke up with her over text. She came into the living room with mascara running down her face, and I held her while she cried, and I told her that anyone who could not see how incredible she was did not deserve her. For 22 years, I have been her dad in every way that matters. Lily always called me dad. Until last Thanksgiving. She brought her fiancé, Marcus, to meet the family. Nice guy. Good handshake. He seemed nervous, the way anyone would be meeting their future in-laws for the first time. My wife had cooked for 2 days, turkey, stuffing, her famous sweet potato casserole. The house smelled like cinnamon and sage, and the table was set with the good china we only pull out twice a year. We were about halfway through dinner. The conversation was easy, comfortable. Marcus was telling a story about his work, and then he turned to me with this genuine smile and said, "It is really great to finally meet Lily's father. I have heard so much about you." And before I could say a word, Lily put her fork down and said, "Actually, he is my stepdad. My real dad is someone else." The table went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone pauses between sentences. The kind where the air itself seems to stop moving. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. I could hear the furnace humming in the basement. Marcus looked confused. My wife's mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to say something but could not find the words. My son, my biological son, who was 14, just stared at his plate. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Not a quick hit. A slow, heavy pressure, like something was sitting on my ribs and would not move. I smiled at Marcus because that is what you do. You smile. You keep things moving. You do not fall apart at the Thanksgiving table. After dinner, once Marcus was in the living room watching football with my son, I found Lily in the kitchen drying dishes. I leaned against the counter and kept my voice calm. "Hey, kid, can we talk about what happened at dinner?" She did not look at me. She said she had been thinking about it for a while and wanted to be honest about her identity. She said calling me dad felt dishonest because I was not biologically her father. She said it was nothing personal. She said she still cared about me. I stood there holding a dish towel, and I felt 22 years of school plays and soccer games and midnight essay reviews flash through my mind like a slideshow. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say, I am standing right here. I have always been standing right here. Where is your real dad? Can you even tell me his name? But I did not say any of that. I respected her right to define our relationship on her terms. It hurt, deeply, in a way I did not know I could still hurt at 53 years old. But I told her I loved her regardless of what she called me. She nodded and kept drying dishes, and I went out to the garage and sat in my truck for 20 minutes in the dark, just breathing. Then the wedding planning started. Lily and Marcus set a date for next October. Big venue. 300 guests. Lily's fiancé's parents are covering half the cost, which is generous. My wife told me over coffee one morning that we were expected to cover the other half. She said it casually, like it was already decided. About $35,000. I set my mug down and looked at her. I said, I am not comfortable paying for the wedding. She stared at me like I had said something in a language she did not understand. What do you mean? She asked. I told her it was not punishment. It was not spite. It was not revenge for what happened at Thanksgiving. But Lily had made it clear that I was not her father, and paying for a wedding is traditionally a father's role. If I am a stepdad, if that is the word she chose, then my financial obligations are different. A stepdad can give a gift. A stepdad can contribute. But a stepdad is not expected to write a $35,000 check. My wife is devastated. She says I am being petty and that money should not be tied to feelings. She says Lily is still my daughter no matter what she calls me. And maybe she is right about that last part. But here is what I cannot get past. You do not get to choose which parts of fatherhood apply to me. You do not get to say he is not my real dad when it comes to identity, but he is absolutely my real dad when it comes to writing checks. Lily has not spoken to me directly about it. She communicates through her mother now, which tells me everything I need to know about where I stand. Every night I walk past her old bedroom, the one I painted lavender when she was 9 because it was her favorite color, and I think about the man she says is her real father. A man who has never painted a room for her. A man who has never sat in a tiny auditorium seat. A man who does not exist in any meaningful way in her life. And she chose him, not by finding him, but by rejecting me. I would pay for that wedding in a heartbeat if I were her dad. She told me I am not. I still love her. That has not changed and it never will. But being told you are not someone's real father and then being expected to fulfill every financial obligation of a real father. That is a contradiction I cannot reconcile. It is a door that she closed, and I do not know how to walk through a closed door with an open wallet and pretend everything is fine. Am I the jerk? This next one is wild. AITA for refusing to cook separate meals for my picky in-laws every holiday? Every holiday, I host. That is just how it has always been. When my husband and I bought our house 9 years ago, I looked at that big open kitchen with the double ovens and the 6-burner stove and I thought, this is it. This is where I feed people. I love cooking. Not in a casual, throw something together way. I mean I love it the way some people love running marathons. I get a high from it. I spend days planning menus, flipping through cookbooks, bookmarking recipes, building spreadsheets of ingredients and timelines. Thanksgiving alone takes me 3 days of prep. I wake up at 5 in the morning the day before to start brining the turkey. I make my own stock from scratch. I roast the bones overnight. The whole house smells like heaven by Wednesday evening, and I stand in the middle of it feeling like I have built something beautiful. The problem is not the cooking. The problem is the audience. My in-laws have what I diplomatically call preferences. I used to call them demands, but my husband gave me a look once and I have stuck with preferences ever since. My mother-in-law does not eat anything spicy. Now, you might think that means she avoids jalapenos or hot sauce. No, she defines spicy as anything with more seasoning than salt. Garlic is spicy. Paprika is spicy. I once put a single bay leaf in a pot of soup and she pushed the bowl away and said it tasted aggressive. Aggressive. A bay leaf. My father-in-law will not eat any vegetable that is green. Not broccoli, not green beans, not spinach, not zucchini. I once made a salad with mixed greens and he looked at it like I had set a live animal on the table. He will eat corn. He will eat carrots. That is the list. My sister-in-law is gluten-free. Not because of celiac disease. Not because of any medical diagnosis. She read a blog once in 2019 and decided gluten was poison. She has told me this while eating soy sauce straight from a bottle, which, for the record, contains wheat. But sure, gluten-free it is. And then there is my brother-in-law. He only eats meat that is well done. And I do not mean a respectable well done. I mean he wants it cooked until it could be used to sole a shoe. He once sent a steak back at a restaurant 3 times. The waiter looked like he was going to cry. I have seen this man chew a piece of beef for a full minute and a half, jaw working like he was trying to break through concrete, and then nod and say, "Now that is a good piece of meat." For 8 years, I have made separate dishes for each of them. Every holiday, every gathering, a bland, unseasoned, practically colorless version of every single side dish for my mother-in-law. A sad little plate of corn and carrots for my father-in-law, arranged nicely because I am not a monster. A gluten-free version of every bread, stuffing, and dessert for my sister-in-law, which, by the way, gluten-free baking is a nightmare. The flour alone costs 3 times as much and the results taste like regret. And a separate cut of meat for my brother-in-law, incinerated beyond all recognition, cooked so long it practically disintegrated when you touched it with a fork. Last Thanksgiving, I counted. I made 32 individual dishes. 32. To accommodate 4 people's preferences out of a table of 12. It took 4 full days of prep. I was in the kitchen for 11 straight hours on Thanksgiving Day. 11 hours. I stood at that stove until my lower back was screaming and my feet felt like they were made of hot glass. I could hear everyone in the living room laughing and cheering at the football game. I could hear my kids running around the yard. I could hear my husband refilling drinks and telling stories. And I was alone in the kitchen, sweating over a gluten-free pumpkin pie that nobody was even going to say thank you for. When I finally sat down to eat, the food was cold. My plate was whatever scraps were left after everyone else had served themselves. My mother-in-law looked at the mashed potatoes and asked if I had put anything in them. I had put butter and cream and a tiny bit of white pepper. She took one bite and set her fork down with a sigh that could have been heard from space. I almost cried right there at the table. I held it together, but later that night, after everyone had gone home and my husband was loading the dishwasher, I sat on the kitchen floor with a glass of wine and just stared at the ceiling. I thought, I cannot do this again. So this year, I made an announcement. I sent it in the family group chat 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I kept it simple and polite. I said that I would be making 1 menu this year. 1 turkey, prepared the way I wanted to prepare it. 1 set of sides, seasoned properly. 1 dessert, made with real flour and real sugar and real everything. It would be delicious. It would be balanced. It would be prepared with love. And anyone who had a specific preference they needed accommodated was more than welcome to bring their own dish to share. You would have thought I had declared war on the entire family. My mother-in-law called within 10 minutes. She said I was being inconsiderate. She said she had always been gracious about coming to my home and the least I could do was make food she could eat. I stood at my kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear, eyes closed, and I just breathed. I told her I loved having her and that she was welcome to bring something she enjoyed. She hung up without saying goodbye. My father-in-law sent a text that just said, "I guess I just won't eat then." 5 minutes later he sent a second text. "Don't worry about me. The Guilt Trip Express, running right on schedule." My sister-in-law called my husband, not me. She asked him what she was supposed to do. He told her what I had suggested, that she bring a gluten-free dish to share. She said, "That's not my job as a guest." Not her job. As if the previous 8 years of me running a small restaurant out of my kitchen had been my job. My brother-in-law was actually the most reasonable about it. He just shrugged and said he would figure it out. For 2 weeks, I waited. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me wondered if I was ruining Thanksgiving. But the bigger part of me, the part that had spent the last 8 years exhausting herself for people who never once said thank you, that part held firm. My husband backed me up, and I will be grateful for that until the day I die. When his mother called him to complain, he listened. And then he said, calm and clear, Mom, you are welcome at our table. You are always welcome, but the kitchen is her domain, and she has made her decision. If you want to bring something for yourself, we would love that. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up at 7 instead of 5. I made one turkey, brined and herbed and rubbed with butter and sage, the way I had always wanted to make it. I roasted vegetables with olive oil and rosemary. I made stuffing with sourdough bread and sausage. I baked a pumpkin pie from scratch, and the crust was flaky and golden and perfect. The whole house smelled incredible. I had the radio on. I was dancing in my kitchen. Actually dancing. The family arrived at 2. My mother-in-law walked in carrying a small container of plain white rice. She set it on the counter without a word. My sister-in-law brought a store-bought gluten-free pie. She set it next to the rice and did not look at me. My father-in-law sat down at the table and looked at the spread. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he put a scoop of the roasted carrots on his plate. Then, slowly, almost experimentally, he added a small spoonful of the green bean casserole. I watched from across the table, holding my breath. He took a bite. He chewed. He nodded. He took another bite. My brother-in-law ate the turkey as it was. Medium-high, juicy, perfectly cooked. He did not say a word about it being underdone. He went back for seconds. By the end of the meal, my father-in-law had cleaned his plate. My brother-in-law told me it was the best turkey he had ever had. My mother-in-law ate her rice but also quietly helped herself to the mashed potatoes. She did not mention the seasoning. And me? I sat down at that table at 2:15 in the afternoon. I ate hot food. I tasted every dish I had made. I watched my kids eat and laugh and smear gravy on their faces. I held my husband's hand under the table for a moment and he squeezed it, and I thought, this is what Thanksgiving is supposed to feel like. For the first time in 8 years, I was not a caterer in my own home. I was a person, sitting at her own table, eating a meal she was proud of, with her family. Am I the jerk? The turkey says no. Here's another one for you. When the free Thanksgiving dinner for 8 people was not enough, she wanted it for 20. I volunteer with a local charity that provides free Thanksgiving meals to families in need. I have been doing this for 7 years now. Every year, starting the Monday before Thanksgiving, a team of about 30 volunteers packs into the kitchen of a church basement on Elm Street, and we cook. We cook for 2 straight days. We make complete dinners: turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, stuffing, cranberry sauce, dinner rolls, and pie. Each package is designed to feed a family of 8 comfortably, with leftovers. We prepare about 200 of them. The turkeys alone take up every oven in the building, and we borrow roasters from anyone willing to lend one. This is a labor of love. Nobody gets paid. Local businesses donate the ingredients. The grocery store on 5th provides the turkeys, the bakery donates flour and butter, and a couple of farms outside town send over potatoes and cranberries by the crate. Some of these businesses are not doing great themselves, but they show up every single year. I have watched a butcher wrap 200 pounds of turkey at 4 in the morning and refuse to take a dime. We deliver the meals the morning of Thanksgiving, early, so families can have a warm dinner on the table without worrying about the cost. That is the whole point. A warm meal. A little dignity. One less thing to stress about on a day that is supposed to be about gratitude. Last Thanksgiving, I was on the delivery route that covers the east side of town. I had 12 deliveries that morning. Most of them went the way they always do. You knock, someone opens the door, and their face just changes. I have seen grown men tear up holding a box of mashed potatoes. A woman last year grabbed my hand with both of hers and just held it and whispered thank you 3 times. Those moments are why I keep coming back. My 9th delivery was to a woman who had signed up through our application process. She had indicated on her form that she had a family of 6. Standard procedure. We gave her the package that feeds 8. A little extra, as we always do. I carried the 2 boxes up her porch steps. They were heavy. The turkey alone was 12 pounds, and the sides were packed tight in foil containers. She opened the door and I smiled and said Happy Thanksgiving. She looked at me, then looked down at the boxes. She did not smile back. She just said bring them in, so I carried them inside and set them on her kitchen counter. She started opening the boxes right there, pulling back the foil lids one at a time, inspecting each container like she was checking inventory at a warehouse. When she got to the turkey, she lifted the whole pan and stared at it. She frowned. Not a little frown. A deep, disgusted frown, like I had set a dead raccoon on her counter. "This is not going to be enough," she said. I kept my voice calm. "Ma'am, that bird is 12 pounds. It should easily feed 6 to 8 people, and you will probably have leftovers for sandwiches the next day." She shook her head. "I actually need food for 20 people. I invited my extended family over. My sister's family, my mother, my cousins. 20. I felt something tighten in my chest. I explained, as politely as I could manage, that our packages are designed for the household that applied. The application she filled out said 6 people. We cannot provide meals for additional guests who were not part of the original request. She stared at me like I had said something unreasonable. Then she went back to the boxes. She started going through the sides one by one, reading each label out loud. Mashed potatoes, gravy, stuffing, cranberry sauce. She looked up. Where is the mac and cheese? We did not make mac and cheese this year. We never have, actually. What about sweet potato casserole? We did not make that either. She pushed the foil back on the last container. Is this pie pecan? It is pumpkin. She actually pushed it away from her on the counter. My family does not eat pumpkin pie. Nobody told me it was going to be pumpkin. I stood there in that kitchen, holding nothing now because I had already set everything down, and I just looked at her. Behind me, in the car, I had 3 more deliveries to make to families who would be overjoyed to have exactly what was in those boxes. Back at the church, I knew there were volunteers still cleaning up who had been on their feet since 5 in the morning, some of them elderly, some of them who had given up their own Thanksgiving morning to be there. 30 people had spent 2 days cooking this food. I could still smell the turkey grease on my jacket. And this woman was critiquing the menu. I took a slow breath. I could feel the heat rising up the back of my neck, but I was not going to lose my composure. Not on Thanksgiving. Not representing the charity. Is there any way you could go back and get more? She asked. Like, another turkey? And maybe some different sides? Ma'am, we have already distributed all of our meals to other families. Everything has been delivered. She paused, and I thought for one hopeful second that she might understand. Then she said, "Well, could you take back someone else's meal and give it to me? I need it more than they do. I have 20 people coming." I felt my jaw tighten. I pictured the woman from my 3rd delivery that morning, the one who had cried when she saw the rolls because she told me her kids had not had bread in the house for a week. I pictured taking that meal out of her hands and driving it over here so this woman could serve her 20 guests at her extended family gathering. "No," I said, "I cannot do that." I wished her a happy Thanksgiving. She closed the door. She did not say thank you. She did not say goodbye. She just closed the door, and I stood on her porch for a moment, staring at the welcome mat under my feet that said, "Grateful and blessed," in cursive letters. I finished my route. The last 3 deliveries were beautiful. A man at my 10th stop insisted on shaking my hand and telling me about how his kids had been talking about Thanksgiving dinner all week. I sat in my car after the last delivery and just rested my forehead on the steering wheel for a minute. That evening, after I had gotten home and eaten my own modest dinner, I got a notification on my phone. A message had come through the charity's Facebook page. It was her. She had written a 1-star review. Public, for everyone to see. She said the food was insufficient, the selection was limited, the portions were inadequate for a real Thanksgiving, and the charity should be embarrassed by what it was offering to families. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and went to wash the dishes. We still volunteer every year. Every single one of us came back. We still cook for 2 days in that church basement. We still feed 200 families. The grocery store still donates the turkeys, the bakery still sends the flour, and the butcher still shows up at 4 in the morning. We did make one change, though. Applications are now verified, household sizes are confirmed, and no substitution requests are accepted. We put it right on the form. Happy Thanksgiving.